In 2007, Rolex introduced a watch that their own engineers had spent years developing into the most mechanically complex movement the brand had ever produced. The caliber 4161 inside the Yachtmaster 2 was a programmable flyback chronograph with a countdown function that could be set to any interval between 1 and 10 minutes. Designed specifically for the regatta racing start sequences, where sailing competitors receive a 10-minute warning before the gun. The bezel of the watch was part of the mechanism itself, rotating to engage a ring command system that interfaced with the movement to program the countdown, a level of complication that Rolex had never previously attempted in a production wristwatch. The case was 44 millimeters. The dial was busy with a horseshoe-shaped countdown track, a small second sub-dial, an arrow-tipped additional hand, and a name printed across the face in letters large enough to read from a distance. The collector community looked at all of this and reacted with a near-unanimous verdict. One forum member described it as utterly ridiculous. Another attempted to use it at an actual yacht event on the UK's south coast, pulled off the crown during the programming sequence, and dropped it through a gap in the pontoon into the water below. He concluded his review with the words, "Totally useless." The Yachtmaster 2 became, almost immediately, the most argued about watch in the Rolex catalog, and in the 2 decades since its introduction, it has never stopped being argued about. We are going to go through both sides of the Rolex catalog, the models the collector community loves without qualification, and the ones that have generated 17 years of sustained hostility on every forum the watch world has ever produced, explain exactly why each one landed where it did, and answer the question that every Rolex argument eventually comes back to. Does the community's judgment actually track with quality, or does it track with something else entirely? Rolex makes approximately 1 million watches per year. They make them across a catalog that spans tool watches, dress watches, complication watches, and jewelry watches, covering price points from $6,000 at entry to 6 figures at the top of the precious metal complications. The brand has existed continuously since 1905 and has been producing the watches that define its identity since the 1950s. In those 70-plus years of core production, certain models have achieved a consensus of admiration so durable and so universal that questioning them feels structurally impossible. And certain others have generated a specific category of negative reaction, not indifference, not mild disappointment, but active, repeated, publicly expressed hostility from the people who care most about the brand. Rolex is aware of both reactions. Their design and marketing teams monitor forum sentiment as a matter of operational intelligence. The watches that inspire strong negative reactions, as one industry observer noted, are almost always paired with equally strong positive reactions from people who do not share the same concerns. The community's verdict is never unanimous, but the direction of the consensus is always clear. And the direction tells you something important about what the people who love Rolex most actually think a Rolex is supposed to be. The most loved watch in the catalog, by the widest consensus across the longest period of time, is the Submariner. This is not a controversial claim. The Submariner has been in continuous production since 1953, longer than most of the people who argue about watches have been alive. It was designed as a dive watch, water-resistant to 100 meters at introduction, progressively upgraded through successive references to its current 300-meter rating, powered in its modern form by the caliber 3235, with a 70-hour power reserve and a parachrome hairspring resistant to shocks and temperature variation. The case is 41 millimeters. The bezel rotates in one direction only, a safety feature that ensures an accidental knock can only make it read more time remaining underwater, never less. The dial is clean, with large luminous indices and a date window at 3 o'clock. It is available in steel with a black bezel, steel with a green bezel, and precious metal configurations. James Bond wore it in Dr. No in 1962. It has been the reference point against which every other dive watch in the world has been measured since it was introduced. Every serious collector who has spent time with the Submariner arrives at the same conclusion. It is exactly what it is supposed to be, without compromise, without excess, without a single element that could be removed without making it worse. The black ceramic Submariner in steel reference 124060 without the date, or 126610 LN with it. Trades at secondary market prices meaningfully above retail, not at the spectacular premiums of the Daytona or the Nautilus, but consistently above. because the demand for the watch never falls to a level that allows it to reach equilibrium with supply. The Cosmograph Daytona is the second pillar of the most loved tier and the watch that generates the most auction drama of anything in the Rolex catalog. The Daytona was introduced in 1963 as a racing chronograph, named for the Daytona International Speedway in Florida. Designed to give racing drivers and timekeepers a reliable instrument for measuring lap times with a tachometer scale on the bezel for calculating speed. It sold slowly for the first 2 decades of its existence. In the late 1980s, Italian collectors began seeking out vintage examples with unusual dial configurations, and the market responded. Paul Newman owned one, received as a gift from his wife Joanne Woodward, which he wore daily for racing and which he passed on to the man dating his daughter. In October 2017, that watch sold at Phillips in New York for $17,752,000, the highest price ever achieved at auction for a Rolex at the time. The Daytona's modern incarnation in stainless steel, reference 126500LN, retails at approximately $14,800 and trades on the secondary market between $28,000 and $35,000, a premium of approximately 100% over retail, sustained by an allocation system that delivers 1 or 2 examples per year to authorized dealers in major markets. The movement inside is the Caliber 4130, a column wheel chronograph with a vertical clutch developed entirely in-house by Rolex over years of movement development. It is the most technically sophisticated movement in Rolex's production catalog. The watch's secondary market premium exists because of who wants it relative to how many exist. That ratio has been in the same direction for 40 years. The GMT Master 2 is the third member of the consensus love tier and the model that generates the most affectionate nickname culture in the Rolex collecting world. The GMT was designed in 1954 in collaboration with Pan Am Airlines, which wanted an instrument for its long-haul pilots to track 2 time zones simultaneously during the transcontinental routes that were the cutting edge of commercial aviation at the time. The original model had a bidirectional bezel in 2 colors, one for daytime hours and one for nighttime, allowing the pilot to read local time and home time simultaneously using an additional 24-hour hand pointing to the bezel. The current production GMT Master 2 adds independent setting of the 24-hour hand from the main timekeeping function, allowing the user to track 3 time zones simultaneously: local time on the main hands, home time on the GMT hand against the bezel scale, and a third zone read directly from the 24-hour bezel against the main hands. The nicknames came from the colors. The red and blue bezel is the Pepsi after the Cola brand's color scheme, a name applied first to the vintage aluminum bezels of the 1970s and now carried by the current ceramic version. The black and blue bezel is the Batman, introduced on the reference 116710BLNR. The black and green bezel is the Sprite. The two-tone brown and gold is the root beer on the Everose gold and steel version. The all-black bezel on the steel reference is simply the Batman Blackout, or, in some communities, the Darth Vader. Each nickname is a signal of community membership, a way of saying you know which generation of the bezel you are discussing without describing it at length. The GMT Master 2 trades at secondary market premiums on most configurations, with the steel Pepsi bezel model commanding the largest premium in the current production lineup outside of the Daytona. The Explorer is the 4th member of the most loved group and the one that the collector community returns to most consistently as the watch it recommends to people who want something genuinely good without drama. It was designed in 1953 to accompany Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay on the first ascent of Everest, though the exact role of the watch in that expedition has been debated. What is not debated is that the Explorer has been in continuous production for over 70 years, is available in a 36mm and a 40mm configuration, has no bezel complication, no date, and no function beyond telling the time, with maximum clarity in maximum conditions. It is the only watch in the Rolex catalog that does exactly one thing, does it without compromise, and has never been made to do anything else. Its price at retail is approximately $7,000. It does not trade at a premium on the secondary market to the degree that the Submariner and GMT do. It is not the watch that generates the most forum conversation. It is, by the verdict of people who have worn many expensive watches, the one they come back to most often as the thing that gets it most right. Now here's where the consensus inverts, completely and without ambiguity. The Yachtmaster 2 is the most argued about watch in the Rolex catalog, and the argument is almost entirely one-directional. The case is 44mm in its original configuration and 14mm thick, proportions that push into territory normally occupied by the offshore rather than the Rolex sports watch family. The dial contains a countdown track shaped like a horseshoe, numbered from 1 to 10 to represent the regatta countdown minutes, alongside a small second subdial, a main seconds hand, and the countdown hand, all of which produce a visual density that sits uneasily against the clean legibility that defines the catalog's most loved pieces. The complication itself is genuinely innovative. The Caliber 4 161 that powers the original is, alongside the Skydweller's movement, one of the two most complicated movements Rolex has ever produced in a wristwatch. The ring command bezel system, which must be rotated to engage the programming mode before the countdown can be set, is a mechanical solution to the problem of keeping the setting system waterproof while maintaining full water resistance during use. Technically it works, practically, as documented by the man who dropped his crown into the water at an actual regatta, the complexity of the setup sequence creates problems in the conditions where the complication is most needed. The watch was discontinued in 2024 after 17 years in the catalog. It has been reintroduced in 2026 with the updated Caliber 4 162. The community's reaction to its return has been divided in almost identical proportions to the reaction to its original introduction in 2007. People who disliked it for reasons that did not change with the movement update. The watch generates a specific kind of hostility from collectors who believe that Rolex's genius is precisely its refusal to make unnecessarily complex things, and who see the Yachtmaster 2 as a violation of that principle in search of a complication that almost none of its buyers will ever actually use on a sailboat. The Cellini collection sits in a different category of criticism, quieter in expression but equally durable in the community's assessment. The Cellini is Rolex's dress watch line, named after the Renaissance goldsmith and sculptor Benvenuto Cellini, and it is the only part of the catalog that does not use the oyster case. It is round, it is slim, it wears on a leather strap, it has no integrated bracelet, no sports watch architecture, none of the visual language that defines what most people mean when they say Rolex. What it does have is the movement quality of the broader catalog applied to a dress watch format that Rolex has been refining since the 1960s. The collector community's reaction to the Cellini is not hostility exactly. It is more like a shrug, which in the context of a brand as emotionally charged as Rolex is its own kind of verdict. Forum discussions of the Cellini include observations like, "Your authorized dealer will love you if you actually want one," meaning the absence of demand for the model makes it freely available at retail in a brand where most desirable references require years of relationship building to obtain. The Cellini is available, the Submariner is not. That availability is itself the criticism, expressed as a market fact rather than an aesthetic judgment. Barack Obama wore a Cellini after leaving the White House, which represents a perfectly coherent choice for a man who spent 8 years in a position where the watch on his wrist was examined by every photographer in every room. After the presidency, a round dress watch in white gold on a leather strap that does not announce itself is exactly the right object. The community is aware of this. It still shrugs. The Rolex Milgauss occupies a position that is more complicated than either the loved or hated categories accommodate cleanly. It was introduced in 1956, the same year as the Submariner, and designed for scientists and engineers working in environments with strong electromagnetic fields, specifically the particle physics facilities at CERN in Geneva. The movement is shielded with a soft iron inner case that deflects magnetic fields away from the escapement, allowing the watch to function accurately in environments that would stop a conventional mechanical movement. It was discontinued in 1988 and reintroduced in 2007 with a new reference, a new movement, and a distinctive lightning bolt seconds hand in orange, a design choice that was either charming or gaudy depending on which side of the forum you were reading. The dial is available in green glass, a finishing detail unique in the Rolex catalog, and immediately divisible in opinion. The collector community's relationship with the Milgauss is one of affectionate skepticism. The technical justification is real, The magnetic resistance it offers is genuine engineering, not marketing. The problem is that almost nobody who buys a Milgauss works in a particle accelerator, which means the complication that defines the watch is present but functionally invisible for the overwhelming majority of its owners. It occupies the same paradox as the Yachtmaster 2 in this respect, a genuine technical achievement solving a problem that most buyers do not have. The Milgauss was not updated at Watches and Wonders in 2022, despite predictions it would be. The community interpreted its absence as a signal of possible discontinuation. The watch continues to exist in the catalog without the energy that surrounds the Submariner, the Daytona, or the GMT. It is respected, it is not loved. The Skydweller is the most recent entry in the complicated relationship category, and it is the one where the community's verdict has shifted most noticeably over time. Introduced in 2012 as Rolex's newest model in decades, the Skydweller contains what Rolex describes as one of the most complex mechanisms the brand has ever produced, a combination of an annual calendar and a dual time zone function operated through the ring command bezel system shared with the Yachtmaster 2. The annual calendar automatically accounts for months of different lengths, requiring only a single manual correction per year at the end of February, while displaying the current month through 12 apertures around the dial perimeter. The initial reception was divided. The case was 42 millimeters, placing it in the larger end of the Rolex sports watch family. The dial was busy with 12 small month indicators around the perimeter that some found clever and others found cluttered. The price at retail is the highest in the Rolex sports watch catalog, currently above $15,000 in steel. On the secondary market, it trades at meaningful premiums. The community's assessment has moved from skeptical to accepting over the decades since its introduction, driven partly by time, partly by the genuine usefulness of the annual calendar for travelers, and partly by the increasing scarcity of the watch at authorized dealers as its cultural profile has grown. The Skydweller is no longer the watch people argue about in the way they argued about it in 2012. It is increasingly the watch that people who cannot get a Daytona or a GMT consider as an alternative with legitimate standing. That trajectory is its own verdict. Here is what the pattern across all of these watches actually says when you step back from the individual arguments. The watches the Rolex community loves without qualification are the ones that do something specific, do it without excess, and have done it the same way for long enough that they have accumulated a weight of history that no contemporary release can match. The Submariner dives, the Daytona times, the GMT tracks zones, the Explorer reads time in any condition. Each of them is the most refined version of a single answer to a single question. The watches the community argues with, sometimes harshly, are the ones where the question being answered is either too narrow to be practically relevant for most buyers, or too new to have accumulated the historical weight that transforms a tool into an icon. The Yachtmaster 2 answers the question of how to time a regatta start sequence with your wrist underwater. That is a real question. It is a question that a very small number of the watch's buyers have ever actually needed answered on the water. The community's resistance to it is not irrational. It is the instinct of people who believe that a Rolex should be the best answer to a question that actually applies to the person wearing it, and that the gap between the complication and the owner's life is itself a kind of failure. However technically accomplished the solution inside the case might be, Rolex is counting on both reactions equally. The brand has survived and grown through 7 decades of strong opinions from people who care enough to have them. The watches they love are the ones that define the brand for everyone. The watches they argue about are the ones that push the catalog toward territory it has not previously occupied. Every model the collector community now considers essential was, at some point in its history, the thing people were not sure about. The Submariner was an oversized novelty in 1953. The Daytona sat in cases for 15 years before the market decided it was desirable. The GMT was a corporate commission for an airline that no longer exists. The watches worth loving are right there in the catalog, exactly where they have always been. So are the ones worth arguing about. That argument is part of what makes the brand worth paying attention to in the first place.